Hey, good evening, baseball fans. Tonight I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to take us back over a century ago, actually 111 years ago, to actually do a different card and a different Hall of Famer. The one I'm going to actually present now is Ed Walsh. When I first started this journey of trying to put together a card from each Hall of Fame player, I started with my favorite baseball team, which would be the White Sox. No secret there, if we've had a chance to look at my videos. Up to this point, I was starting with the White Sox players, and I started with some of the ones that were a little bit more affordable and started moving back in time. This one player in particular was going to be a little bit more challenging to get because he was already out of baseball by the end of the 1917 season, so there wasn't really cards produced after that. So most of the cards produced are going to be a little bit pricier given the time period that they were produced. Ed Walsh, before we kind of go into the card itself, Ed Walsh himself pitched from the White Sox from 1904 all the way through the 1916 season. He was hurt during the 1916 season, got released, and ended up playing with Brooklyn for one season before he was actually the Braves. He was let go before he was retired at the end of that season in 1917. He did go on to play a little bit of independent ball thereafter, and came back and actually managed the White Sox for 3 games, and I think in 1923, if I'm not mistaken. Ed Walsh, when you're talking about great pitchers from the beginning of the century, from the first 20 years or so before the dead ball era ended, you think of Christy Mathewson, you think of Walter Johnson, you think of Cy Young, and there may be a few others, but Ed Walsh is a name that doesn't come up all too often, and probably should. This is actually the career leader in ERA. He's got the lowest career ERA of any pitcher who ever pitched Major League Baseball, and is also in the Hall of Fame. His career ERA, if I can find it real quickly, oh, I was on the wrong screen real quick, was a career low of 1.82, which is really hard to even fathom in this day and age of baseball. When if you have an ERA under 3, you're rocking it. He's consistently under 2 for many of the years of his career. He's also the last pitcher to win 40 games in a season. That's unbelievable to think about this day and age. He actually had 55 decisions that season in 1908 and was 40-15. After that, he never came close to those numbers again. As you can imagine, his arm probably was pretty much shot. He did appear in 62 games in the 1912 season, but never got back to the 69 games that he pitched during that season in 1908, and pitched far less innings that season. Pitchers were just used differently at that time. It was really expected that you finished and ended a game as you came in there, regardless of whether you got a decision or whether you won or not. You were expected to be on that mound for the entirety of the game. So it's just a very, very different period of time in baseball. Couldn't even imagine it now from somebody pitching that long into the game, time and time again. In fact, in that season, he had 11 shutouts, which led the league. He had 42 complete games, which led the league. He started 49 of the 66 games he appeared in. And if actually appearing in 66 games is actually the high for pitchers that year, so they didn't really use relievers all that much, which is kind of crazy at this point. He struck out the most batters of 269 that season. Also gave up the most hits of 343 at that point. It was on the White Sox first World Series winning team back in 1906. That one is noted for being the only time the White Sox and Cubs have ever played each other in the postseason. I know many fans around here would love to be able to see that again, but it's been almost 120 years since that happened, so I'm not holding my breath. The White Sox, who were known as the hitless wonders at that time, actually went on to beat the favored Cubs. The Cubs certainly did fine thereafter as they went on to win a couple more World Series before they had that long extended period where they hadn't won up until the 2016 season. He missed the 1917 White Sox championship season by 1 year because he was already let go by the White Sox at that point in time. So this was his only World Series appearance, and they did win during that season. Other things about Ed Walsh that's kind of interesting, he actually was working in a coal mine when he was actually discovered and recruited to pitch professionally. which is something you just don't see anymore during these times. But back then, that was not an uncommon occurrence for players to kind of work themselves out of mill jobs and mining jobs to be able to play professionally. It was kind of the escape from those environments, if you will. And obviously, professional athletes are just looked at and cultivated very differently now in today's game. So what you're seeing right now is actually a 1911 Mecca double folder, often referred to as also the T201 set. This is an excellent 5 condition PSA 5 that I was able to pick up last year. What's interesting about this card design is they were first issued in packs of Mecca cigarettes. That's hence the name, Mecca double folders. There's actually a line in the middle of the card, if you can see it, where it's a perforated line where you can actually bend the card over. And you're wondering, why would you want to do that? Well, the second bottom half of the card also served as the bottom half of the card for the image on the back of the card. So this was actually a shared player with the catcher at that time that was on the team as well. And so you would fold it over and see if you folded it back in this direction, that would actually be his feet. So they're kind of a unique design at that point. Obviously they didn't catch on and became super popular, so you didn't see them year after year. Briefly in, I believe, 1955, Topps did a similar design where they had double folders as well. I think they called them double headers, if I'm not mistaken, but they're really the only times I remember seeing any cards of any significant value that were designed this way. They had a brief stat line here on the back from the previous season on the cards, in each and every card. And they were kind of not always cut very evenly, which is kind of interesting. Maybe it was intended to do that to make it bend more easier when you're actually able to fold the card. The condition is, as long as this crease isn't ripped, it's not usually used against the card. And looking at this one, it may have gotten folded once, but it looks like it was mostly kept flat for all the years before it actually was able to get graded. Again, it's an excellent example. In fact, it's an excellent 5 of that card. I'm just really pleased to be able to pick that one up. And again, it was the last White Sox Hall of Famer that I need to be able to pick up to have a graded card from each and every White Sox Hall of Famer. What I did to judge that is I actually went to the Hall of Fame website and I searched by Hall of Fame players, and then I searched by what was the team they predominantly played for. So that may mean I have a graded card of every Hall of Famer that played for the White Sox if they were only there for like half a season, kind of like Ken Griffey Jr. in 2008. But I have them for the ones that spent the majority of their career with the White Sox. So obviously Eddie Walsh, who spent all but 1 season with the White Sox, is going to have a card in this collection. Some other interesting things about this card is it's only been graded by PSA 222 times, which is kind of, when you think about like scarcity now of cards and low serial numbered cards, kind of thinking about something that's only been graded 222 times. That's pretty cool when I'm thinking about it. And actually less than 50 are graded higher, which isn't too bad. There actually is a PSA 9 of this card, if you can believe it. I can only imagine what condition that might be in. Other things that are interesting about this set is it's 50 cards total, so it's an easy card set to put together, and actually they're not too terribly expensive, which is kind of surprising for cards of this era. They're not necessarily as popular as the smaller tobacco cards that are like in the T206 sets, for example. So you can put this set together probably within reason. You're going to be having to pay more, obviously, for like Ty Cobb and things like that. It's probably out of my price range per se, but maybe not for others. There's never been any PSA 10s of these cards. There actually has been 13 PSA 9s. On this entirety set. So that's kind of shows you just how difficult the condition has kind of been. It looks like 5s and 4s are kind of like the most common grades that have been awarded for the cards that have been submitted to PSA. One other thing, I do have one other card from the set. It's also another Hall of Famer, but it's not a White Sox player, because actually I moved on and started doing some of the St. Louis Browns, using that as an example of the team. And the Hall of Famer on this one is actually not on the front. So this is a St. Louis Browns card. It's probably was not kept very well because there's some smudges and stuff that's on the front that maybe could chip off or not, but the Hall of Famer is actually on the back. And it's Bobby Wallace. which is a name that's probably not too familiar to most people, but he is in the Hall of Fame. So I'll flip this one over and kind of show you the image of Bobby Wallace, which is on the back and at the bottom. He does have other cards during this time period, so it's not necessarily hard to get a Bobby Wallace card. When you look at his career numbers, nothing really kind of stands out. He was known to be a pretty good fielding shortstop and third baseman, maybe the best of that period of time, but he was also not like a real strong power hitter. 2,309 hits is not necessarily a huge number, obviously, when you kind of consider the people that are in the Hall of Fame. He batted just 268 for his career, but what made him kind of stand out, and he played from 1894 all the way through 1918. What made him kind of stand out is actually when the statistic of WAR was created. So this Hall of Famer was one that was kind of commonly like criticized, of like, why is he in the Hall of Fame when we have these other players that are not? Well, finally they kind of found a statistic that kind of supports his inclusion. His career WAR was actually 76.2, which is actually quite surprising. So when they took that into account against other players that had played his position at that time, he actually graded out pretty well among shortstops at that position. And again, you know, shortstops are not what they are now as far as like being these really big power hitters and high average hitters. So Bobby Wallace, obviously that career number kind of stands out now when you look at WAR, which actually puts him, when you look at career WAR leaders, right in a solid group of Hall of Fame players, and probably where he really belonged all along. But for many people, you know, that was something that they didn't really buy into until probably that statistic came out much, much later. I'll flip this one over, you can kind of see the stat line on the back. I think in that season he only batted 258. They had another stat line for him. His fielding percentage was about 95%. He had 33 errors, which is kind of crazy to think about now, but again, during the dead ball era, not having very manicured infields, baseballs that were being used game after game after game, that were covered in spit and tobacco to be able to kind of make the balls move in ways that are just not allowed now. You probably would make more errors. Even our great players now would probably have some difficulties being able to have a season with less than 33 errors. But that's about it. You can feel free to look information up on these guys. Information on both of these guys is pretty readily available. These are my oldest graded cards that I own. Not my oldest cards, but my oldest graded ones. I'll kind of pull them back out real quick. I'll put the Eddie Walsh in front and put Bobby in back. I think they look pretty cool, and I like that they are actually not going to break the bank in the process too. And they're really old, which is really cool to me. All right, have a great night and have a great week.